Songs about a church.
What's up, Steven? How's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
I'm also doing good. I'm glad to hear you are. Um,
Life under quarantine,
yeah,
and we're just a couple dudes starting a podcast.
yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. It's the
As
logical
one
conclusion
does.
to the situation.
I mean, this is just kind of how men have behaved since they were living in caves, you know?
Yeah, fireside
Just
podcast
guy
chats.
just guy behavior.
Doing
It's
bro
wired into
stuff.
us. Yep.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of bro stuff, Jesus is my bro. Um, He's
This
also
is
my
off to a
co-pilot.
really good start. Holy
He's
cow.
also my. Is he my husband? Girls can say Jesus is their husband, but I can't say that because that's homosexual.
I
But I'm.
don't
I
I don't
still.
know any girls who are really stoked about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
The church is the bride of Christ, though. There's so much gay-sounding rhetoric in the Bible that I even as an idiot middle schooler, I was always like making fun of it, and then as I got older, I was like, wait, no one else even thinks like sees this. Like, it's such low-hanging fruit. Um,
uh, yeah,
but
I mean, even talking about fruit as much as they do.
oh yeah, fruits, seed.
Yeah.
I mean that's just okay. Yeah. Um, but also church is a youth
We're
group.
not even 2 minutes into this, and we have concluded that the Bible is actually
It's so gay.
gay. I feel
um,
like we could just end recording right here.
yeah, if
And
I feel like that's what we were trying to go with this, whether we knew it or not. We were trying to make some really deep
we
discoveries
thought we
about
thought we would
religion and
need like
life,
20 episodes to get there, but
and
no, we
gather
did
data. We
it.
don't need to talk to anyone else.
Yeah.
Um,
We will anyway, just for shits and giggles,
oh
but
yeah, for posterity.
yeah.
Um, But yeah, that kind of dirty joke was like high class fucking humor in my youth group. I don't know how was it for you. What kind of church were you? What was church life for you as a kid?
um you know, we were, I guess, in terms of like that humor, we were tolerant of it, and I definitely was kind of the biggest producer, you could say, of
A
those sorts of jokes. Um and for that I was kind of the church equivalent of the class clown a lot of the time, for better and worse. Um at least within like the smaller Bible study group that we had. We had these like things called breakfast clubs where we would get together for dinner every couple weeks, and it would just be the people of your gender and your grade. So it was just me and the guys of my grade at church getting together, and we never actually like really read the Bible, but it was like the closest we really ever had to Bible study. Um, so it was, I guess, very laid back.
mm-hmm.
It was a very casual. It was, for me, it was more of a social thing than uh, any sort of like scholarly
Yeah.
endeavor. To this day, I have not read the whole Bible, um, and
Not
I could
many
not
people
tell you.
have.
Um, yeah, I mean, I met quite a few at like conferences and stuff.
Oh, yeah,
People
I mean,
who
that's where
like,
you're gonna meet them.
right. Well, I mean, I one time met some people who like literally had the whole thing memorized, so you could name a
Whoa.
verse and they could recite it. Um,
Okay. Honestly, props.
yeah, I mean, weird, but I
I would
also
ask him like
can't.
about numbers, like and numbers 413. Like,
Yeah, just the really obscure ones.
yeah.
I mean, I couldn't tell you like what their thoughts on the Bible were, but they had it
Mm-hmm.
memorized. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, for me, church was kind of a social thing. We did retreats and like summer trips and stuff like that. Wednesday night hangouts. Um, yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
for the most part.
That's cool.
I do
Yeah.
miss those trips a lot.
Yeah. There's no matter how far away I get, I always have a nostalgia for like the youth group trips. Did you
Yeah.
Did it? Did you said it was more social than scholarly? Were your parents pretty involved with the same church and like community, and did that?
Yeah, we would generally go as a family and sit together as a
Mhm.
family. So it was very much like our family were members.
Weird.
And that was why I was at that church, was because that's the one my parents picked. Um, so yeah, and they would come on some of the trips, but they kind of also, I think, understood that that was kind of a place for me to be myself a little more.
That's cool.
So for the most part, they gave me some space, which I very much appreciated, and which I think, in retrospect, was like very important for that being kind of a place where I could kind of explore myself a little bit more than I would have been able to otherwise.
Hmm.
Um,
Did your parents have any media restrictions on you growing up? I mean, like I guess everyone
they
does,
were
but like
harsh.
specifically. Okay.
I mean, not the worst, certainly. Like, we were not the hardcore evangelicals who are only allowed to watch like the Christian approved media, but like growing up, I was really into military history, and there were a lot of like movies and media I couldn't watch. Um, but they would let me read just about anything I wanted. So it was kind of very much like they did not trust video games or TV or movies, but like
It's
I
like
could read
yeah,
pretty much any book. Like, we were obviously,
loophole.
Harry Potter was allowed, but also like lots of books about like soldiers and war. Um, yeah, I have no idea how many times I read Band of Brothers, but
Dang.
um, yeah. Um,
I just imagine
and
you finish up watching VeggieTales and then open up Band of Brothers.
uh, there were a few years like between those two, but yeah, kinda. Um, it. I mean, they also they censored music for a while, but also a lot of the stuff I grew up listening to was Christian, so they didn't really have to,
Hmm.
um, which was nice. Um, Even though it meant I was basically just listening to like Reliant K and Toby Mac for quite a while.
Hell yeah.
Um, but eventually I started getting into more punk and hardcore, and they didn't really seem to notice because I had had several years of being like the goody two shoes, only listening to like Christian media. So by the time I got into like punk, like actual punk, they didn't really do anything about it because they didn't realize what was going on
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's
until it
just
was.
maybe it's a new Reliant K song. It's like, nope,
Yeah.
sorry. You
Yeah. Well, I
desensitized
think
them.
it helped that I was into Skillet for a while.
Oh yeah.
So I think they kind of were aware that there was like such a thing as like quote unquote hardcore Christian music.
Hmm.
Even if, like, the first metal bands I got into, like As Cities Burn and Under Oath and stuff, they were all Christian too. So it was quote unquote safe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. I remember my parents did not like metal music, and then my brother had to show them the lyrics because they're like, "What are you even saying?" They could be saying anything, and the lyrics were all Christian. They're like, "Oh, okay, that's fair." And then he could listen to whatever he wanted because he could just tell them it was more Christian. Um, yeah, it's interesting. Like well, obviously, like everyone listens to Reliant K at some point, like Reliant K, Switchfoot, Toby Mac, and how people go different directions.
It's just a trifecta of like stuff that everyone had.
Yeah,
And they all, even though they're totally disparate genres, they all play concerts together,
yeah,
um, which just makes it kind of weird because it's like they don't, like, at a lot of these big concerts you'll see like Hawk Nelson, Toby Mac, and Skillet,
yep,
bands that musically have nothing to do with each other, but like church groups can go together.
yeah, yeah. The crowds have a significant overlap. The music, not really. I guess if you like just look at it purely from a musical like perspective,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, they're all kind of singing to the same people. Did you have to sneak anything? Does like were your parents pretty hyper vigilant? Did you ever get in trouble?
No, partly because, like I said, they kind of trusted me by the time I was getting into like more secular stuff.
Hmm.
They also just didn't know how to keep track. They just weren't paying much attention.
Yeah.
Um, not like in a neglectful sense, but just where they trusted me, I
Yeah.
guess.
That's cool.
I was a very well behaved kid, at least like in kind of the superficial sense.
Hmm.
Like I didn't try and sneak out or anything, so they didn't feel the need to like keep an eye on my media either. And I like willingly went to
Hmm.
church for like the vast majority of my childhood, you know, and
Hmm.
I would sign up for the retreats and stuff. So like they had no reason, I think, to be suspicious.
Yeah.
So they weren't super vigilant. Even the only thing they really stuck dug their heels in for a while on was movies, I think,
Hmm.
um, and also video games. And I think just because it's harder to like pretend that Call of Duty has any like redeeming religious value or
Yeah.
whatever.
You can play Doom.
Um,
You're just killing demons.
I don't think I ever played Doom.
Ooh, that's biblical.
Um,
I mean, it's not biblical, but I mean, you're killing demons, so like, I don't know why Christians should have a problem with it. You're the good guy. You're just
wrong kind of demons,
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah.
alien Mars demons. You mentioned that the church, like your experience of church, was more social than like scholarly. Did what was your home life as far as religion went? Did you like prayers before meals and bedtime, or did you guys kind of
Um,
talk about religion?
yeah, we did the prayers before meals. When me and my brother were little, my parents would read to us before bed. Um, and they would read like a chapter out of like Harry Potter or something like that. Um, but it would always be preceded by we had these daily devotions books
Oh
where it
boy,
would
yep.
be this really basic um, like one page story about like a kid who eats some ice cream before dinner or something, and the mom catches him and just like tells him a Bible verse about discipline or something. Like that's it. That's the and then there's like some scripture readings to go along with it. Like so we had one of those every night.
Hmm.
Um Beyond that, like religion didn't really play a very intense like role in my life for the
Hmm.
most part. It was kind of something we did, during the meal prayer, during the daily devotion, and when we were like at a church event.
Yeah.
Um, Beyond that, it just wasn't a major factor.
Did you kind of like what kind of, I guess, understanding or view of like the whole, I guess, the whole pitch of Christianity, like the gospel, the good news and stuff? What did you glean from all these? Because I imagine you're still going through church services and they talk about stuff. So it's um but kind of what picture did you have of, I guess, like, I don't know, salvation, who God was, what God was, and all that stuff? If you never really dove into it um outside of church, what, I don't know, what was kind of your picture of it, if you
Um,
had one?
yeah, that's an interesting question because a lot of what I got was kind of the footnote, not the footnote, the bullet points, um,
What were they?
and just a lot of like the basic stereotypes kind of that you get from just
Mm,
kind of cultural reception. Um, uh, for me, the things I remember mostly were just kind of guilt about sin, heaven and hell, and damnation. Um, and I remember just like being in kind of existential agony through puberty because I just kind of had the basic sense that like you're supposed to kind of be in control of your desires and urges, and that's basically impossible. uh, between the ages of like 11 and 18 or whatever.
Hmm.
Um,
Don't even look at your penis.
I mean, I wouldn't stare at it if that's what you're asking, but I like touched it a lot, which I think you're
No, I
also
said
not
don't
supposed
even.
to do. Sorry, you're quiet. I can't hear you super
Okay,
well,
word.
but
Um,
um,
crank up my volume. But yeah, word. That's fair. What was, I guess, what did you would interpret as the rules to get, like, how to get into heaven were then? I guess.
um, I didn't know, but I remember asking a lot, and there was kind of this ambiguity about um even if there was a heaven, because we were kind of in the shadow of I think, what was his name, like the guy who wrote Velvet Elvis, um something Bell,
Hmm.
I can't remember, but there was kind of just a lot of mixed ideas about what heaven and hell and the afterlife were, and no one gave really any clear answers, or there were a lot of mixed answers about whether heaven and hell were there and how you got into them. But the ambiguity kind of just exacerbated my anxiety
Yeah, yeah,
because
that's horrifying.
yeah, because you're kind of aware there's this very aggressive possibility on the other side, and no one's really clarifying.
Hmm.
And in some cases, like, it felt like the reason they weren't saying anything is because they didn't want to like bite the bullet and admit that God, maybe tortures people for eternity or
Hmm.
allows
Well,
them
it's
to be
not God, it's
tortured.
Satan. It's a
Right,
loophole.
but he allows it.
Yeah,
It's part of his
exactly.
plan.
It really it opens up
Um,
a can of worms on the kind of identity of what kind of God is.
exactly. And I think people were kind of trying to avoid that a lot of the time and more focus on the the quote unquote, the bright side.
Hmm.
um
But the bright side is
but
that you avoid the bad. Like,
right. And so it's like, okay, what do I do to get on the bright side? And
yeah,
wasn't getting clear answers there either. So it was just this very um for me it was just anxiety inducing
yeah,
because I
that's
just didn't
spooky.
know. Um and beyond that, like, since church was like more social and not scholarly, we weren't doing like close, investigative readings of scripture or whatever. So it's kind of like, it was kind of this thing that hovered over me, but I didn't know how to like explore it. So I
Mm,
just ended up feeling anxious and guilty for most of my teenage years.
oof. Yeah, yeah, that's like the perfect cocktail for teenage anxiety.
Yeah.
So did you? I guess if you didn't, I guess if people are ambiguous on how to get saved, was there a point in your Christian church life where you were saved? Was there a
Um,
revival, a
some
prayer thing?
some people did get baptized. Like, we baptized babies in our church, but also like people who are older who kind of came to a transitional point in their life could also be baptized. And some people did that. I never did. I kind of accidentally had to fake my salvation at one point,
Hell yeah.
um, which, like, a lot to unpack just in that idea. But like, we one time went to this big church youth group conference called Chick, Covenant High in Christ, where
Did they
like,
call that chick? Is that not
yep,
chic? That's how you spell
no, they
chic
called
though.
it Chick. I Look, they didn't consult me when they put this together, but
Yeah, damn.
in any case, thousands of kids show up and hang out for a week at this big state college campus. They had bands like David Crowder and Skillet and stuff like that every night. Um, and at the end, so our church would set up this billboard with all the kids who were going, or like a tack board with pictures, and like families could pick the picture of a kid who was going and like pray for them. so that they would have like a good experience there. And then at the end of the week, all the kids would write letters to those families, saying thank you for praying for me, stuff like that. And my last like chick experience was after my last year of high school, so I'm about to go to college, and I had been having like some severe religious doubts, and partly went to chick in hopes of having some sort of reconnection with God. And it just didn't happen. And I was a little bummed, but also kind of, I was looking forward to college and felt like maybe that's just the next part of my life. Maybe this just isn't what I needed right now. But I didn't want the family to feel bad that their prayers had been in vain. Like I wanted them to feel like, I had, felt them or something, because this sort of way of thinking about things clearly resonated with everyone around me.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote in my letter, thank you for praying for me. I accepted Christ into my heart this week. And I thought just they would read it and nothing would come of it. Maybe they would come say like, congratulations, and that would be it. Like, I didn't think it would be a big deal.
And I think they prayed someone into heaven. That's great. That's sweet.
Right. Like, I just didn't want to make a big deal either of the fact that I was going through this severe existential crisis. I wasn't ready to talk about it with anyone yet.
Yeah.
So I wrote that in my letter, and unbeknownst to me, my Bible study leader was reading all the letters before sending them.
What?
And so he read that, and he comes up to me. He's like, hey, I see you accepted Jesus as your savior this week. You should announce that to the whole group. And I was like, I really don't want to. And he was like really pushy, and it kind of became clear, like, this isn't an option. Like, you need to, like, testify, or what is it, witness your testimony, or something like that.
Yeah, there it is.
So in front of we did like a campfire thing where everyone had a chance to say things about their week, and kind of the experiences they had. And it got very heavy. It was a very heavy night where a lot of people came forward with both the fact that there were the positive things, like I had a really good week, I really felt connected. Other people came forward and said, like, I've been struggling because, like, I don't know, I've been being abused, or, I was assaulted, like just really dark stuff. And then in the middle of it, my Bible study leader is pushing me to pretend that that I accepted Jesus in front of like all these people, and even my mom was there.
Oh, God.
And when I said it, she started crying, and it was tough. Like,
oh my goodness.
Because you get to a point where it's like you have to commit to the bit.
Oh yeah, no, you're all in at that point.
Right,
no going back.
Right. And that was just weird. It was just weird, and this bizarre performance that it's like a lot. It was like the last several years of my religious life in a nutshell, basically.
Mm-hmm. Just had like a little microcosm of it in one
yeah,
night.
I mean, I had like a couple other Bible study leaders pull me aside later, and they gave me a Bible with like, they signed it and added like messages of encouragement. I mean, I don't know exactly what I did or what they thought I did, but they thought it was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Because
you're going to heaven instead of hell.
Yeah,
it's fun times.
I don't know what accepting Jesus meant to them, but apparently it was like I guess I said the right words.
Yeah,
and they loved it.
If only getting into heaven was just like the Konami cheat code, instead of like this order of words.
Right, and then you don't have to try anymore or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. That was always interesting. It's like, oh, it's words, it's not works based, but then you have to say the words and then live a faith-filled life. It's like that sounds like
but then is
works.
Is it faith or works or words, or like what is it? And no one had a
ambiguous
clear answer
answers
there.
Yeah,
and so that was just more of the same. Like, I'm not sure what I did here.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, I went to college shortly after, and even though I went to a Christian college, it was still like a chance for me to finally kind of breathe
Mhm.
and get away from that. So the long part of the reason I think I was able to bite that bullet was just this sense of like just a couple more weeks.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, this is go out with a
almost
bang.
done here. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, but
that's good. That kind of answered my follow-up question to that. But I want to, I guess, talk about it more about when you kind of started doubting things, which I know is kind of a sliding process for a lot of people. But you said by that time you were kind of having,
for me, it was definitely a process.
yeah,
And it took a while for me to even articulate that because since I was raised religious, um, it was very odd to me that some people weren't. Like it just was a basic part of reality.
mhm,
So for me, it took a long time to be able to even question that because I had to learn to kind of question like such a fundamental
yeah,
understanding of the way the universe works and who I am and stuff like that. Um, so it was a process that was kind of it started small, like with basic doubts about like the literal truth of the Bible, which kind of snowballed slowly but surely
mhm,
into something bigger. Um, and doubt was kind of often mentioned but not really explored where I was. So I didn't really know who to talk to about it. I do
yeah,
remember one Bible study leader I had in college who was a bit more chill, and so I could open up to him just a little bit in bits and pieces. And
mhm,
he one time told me he's like, it's totally normal for people your age to like start doubting their faith. Like that's just kind of a part of growing up.
yeah.
And like I
It's
remember like
encouraging.
it didn't hit me at the in the moment because I was so guarded about admitting that I was having doubts. Because I
Yeah,
thought if you doubt too much, you end up in hell. So I
yeah.
just had this
You just avoid
weird
it.
identity formation against doubt. But like looking back, that was probably like a really like I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Did
Um,
you?
Go on.
I was just gonna ask. Did you said since church was mostly social, did you have other social, I guess, I don't want to say scene, but groups or interactions outside of the Christian faith where like,
Yeah, I went to a public school, and so church was very much a thing I did like Sunday mornings, Wednesday nights during retreats.
mhm,
My friends at school, like occasionally I would bring them to a thing, um, but because I thought they would have fun, not like necessarily because I
yeah,
was trying
you're
to
not,
witness or whatever.
yeah,
Um, and I played soccer for years, so I had a lot of friends there. I was on the
mhm,
rowing team. Um, I had friends who I would just hang out and play video games with, that sort of
yeah,
thing. So I definitely had like a very active life outside of church, um, which had nothing to do with my
mhm,
religious upbringing. Like we would occasionally kind of talk about religion because like growing up in like Midwest Michigan and like these all white suburbs, like you grow up with religion all around you, like you can't
yeah,
get away from it. But we were all raised in like church was a very compartmentalized part of our life. It didn't animate it in any profound way. So, we were all kind of like in its shadow, but also not affected in it in our everyday lives.
word. That makes sense. I feel like that's a pretty common experience. I mean, depending on churches, but
Yeah.
I feel it's always good. Like the people that feel like they have the roughest time leaving the church are the people that didn't have interactions or
Yeah,
like
it's their whole
friends.
world
Yeah, because I guess
was
you mentioned how you couldn't imagine not being religious, and imagine thinking like seeing people that aren't. They're just quote unquote the other. They're like this mystical person that's like they don't know, and then when they start meeting people that aren't religious, and like, oh, you're a normal human being. It's like, yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that
and
can
it's
be.
interesting because there's this weird tension because, like, on the one hand, religion doesn't run my life in any profound, like, ethical sense, but it is, like, at a kind of epistemological or philosophical level, like, my whole understanding of reality.
Mm,
So, like, I think a lot of, like, part of why I left eventually is because there was this tension between my religious kind of orientation and the sort of life I and everyone else around me, even those churchgoers, were living. Like, it wasn't running our lives in any sort of radical sense that you would
hmm.
think, you know,
Yeah,
religion should.
right. Yeah, because if you buy into what it's saying, it's the Bible asks you to be crazy. Like it asks you to do some crazy things.
Yeah. I mean, not of this world is kind of
Yeah.
the thing. And I and everyone else around me kind of had that, but in a very compartmentalized way where it was like more just something to keep in the back of your mind rather than a radical demand for, like, justice or, some sort of alternative lifestyle.
hmm Was there? So I guess like it's harder to answer. Like, when did you start doubting? But was there kind of a on your process of wrestling with doubt and what you believe? Was there kind of an end or a conclusion to you? Like you're finally like, okay, here's where I stand on this.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of a ambiguous Christian throughout high school, and then I went to college and majored in philosophy, partly to kind of explore and wrestle with all the doubts I was having. And so I was very, like, agnostic throughout college.
The lazy
And
man's religion.
yeah, but it was like a really intense agnosticism. Like,
Hell yeah.
really, like, I actually, like, it was agnosticism was driving me for a lot.
Mm,
Um, and I guess I came out of college kind of ambiguously secular and kind of just indifferent to religious questions. Um, the point where I really, I think, became like an atheist, or where I really just said to myself, like, I don't believe in God, was actually not studying philosophy. I read a lot, and I read like a number of books on, like, the Holocaust. I was curious to hear about that
hmm.
or learn about that. And it's funny because in philosophy of religion, there's like this question of the problem of evil. Like, how can an all powerful God um, allow bad things to happen?
Yeah, it's a heavy hitter.
And yeah, for me, it never really sparked much tension. But when I started reading about what had happened in greater detail, um, that was what kind of like flipped something for me, and where, like, any sort of defense of the existence of God in the face of this barbarity um, became impossible. And that's not to, like, downplay that some people manage to kind of simultaneously, like, have even lived in the camps and stuff and still believe. But for me, it just doesn't make sense on some weird intuitive level. And so I just don't bother. So my atheism is not like a rigorously argued atheism. It's just like on some gut level, it just does not make sense to me anymore.
Mm.
Um, and so some would still say I'm an agnostic, but I say atheist. You know,
That makes sense. I feel like that's often the process because being agnostic gives you a little bit of a bridge.
yeah. And for me, it was weird because college, like at a Christian college, for me became like a weird sort of slow transition out of the church.
Hmm
Um, like, I would not go back to the college I was at. It just isn't a good fit for me now. But it was, like, I think in retrospect, kind of what I needed at the time. because my professors were actually very like comfortable with me. I mean, there are a bunch of philosophy professors. Of course, they wrestle with these sorts of questions all the time for a living, basically. So um, they were kind of able to facilitate those doubts and facilitate a kind of deeper wrestling with some of those big questions that I
Yeah.
had. Um, and so I think weirdly, I'm glad that I had like a much slower, more like um, deliberate process to get out of that.
Yeah. That
Because
makes
I was
sense.
able to kind of wrestle with it at a deeper level than I might have otherwise had I just kind of left and said,
Yeah.
fuck it. Yeah.
Exactly. Because then you're kind of going from weird, ambiguous stuff to something that's equally as unconcrete. That counts. I can say unconcrete.
Shallow. Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. um, yeah, damn, that's definitely. I think yours is the most intentional and like well thought out process that I've heard from people. Um, it's definitely more so than mine. Did you did you like come back from college and talk about this stuff with your parents, or is it
No.
no, no?
Um, I I am not super close with mine. Yeah, I've always been kind of the black sheep, even like in my church and also in my family. So I'm kind of the reader and the kind of esoteric person, and so I've just kind of accepted a certain distance between me and my parents.
hmm
I mean, they know I'm an atheist and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and they
How did
haven't like
they how did they find out?
I don't
I
know.
mean, and just knowing you, I feel like you would
There
have just mentioned it over dinner one day. Just
there
like, oh yeah.
was there was a time in high school where I did ask to not have to go to church anymore
Mm,
because I just no longer felt it. And that was like shortly before I went to college as well. Um, uh, and so they kind of got this weird contradiction where like on the one hand I was like very well behaved religiously, accepted Jesus at Chick, and then like would also suddenly explode in kind of a I don't want to do this anymore. Um,
hmm
so yeah, they were kind of they struggled to keep up a lot, and I think because I just kind of process things a lot on the inside. I'm a very slow introverted processor,
Yeah.
um, and I just kind of come up, say the conclusion basically at the end of it all,
And
and
to
they have to
like
kind
the
of catch up.
observer, yeah, like
Yeah,
they weren't seeing you process it, but then you have like this big thing that you're very sure of because you've been thinking about it.
right.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, as for my atheism, I mean, I don't know if that ever like came up specifically. I think they just kind of get that I don't believe. Um,
hmm
so
Yeah, that could
yeah,
be.
but there was never like a deep heart to heart that I remember.
Yeah.
Um, they might have been like scattered here and there, but overall,
hmm
it was not like that was not to the degree that my parents have like affected me in that way. It's more like just by observing them and finding their life kind of unsatisfactory to
Wow.
me and kind
Yeah.
of wanting something different. Um, but I also try not to be a dick about it and like
Yeah.
to the best of my ability, just kind of leave them. Um, and like being a very like sarcastic, smug person, it doesn't always work, but I do my
I don't
best.
know about smug.
I can be. I mean, I can be pretty like I can be pretty cruel. I'll admit I need to work
hmm
on it when I want to be, and so I sometimes I've been like less than stellar
Yeah.
um, in how I kind of treat their beliefs.
Well, you're better than the people that think that they don't.
Yeah,
Um.
yeah.
What do you call it? Out of coming out, like I guess where you are now, both, and there's good and bad answers to this, but Is there anything? Yeah, like there like there's some. Generally, there are more bad things. This is kind of like this. A lot of people just end up venting to this question, but essentially, is there anything that still like pops up in your brain or affects you today that you can trace directly back to, like, oh, that's from my upbringing in a church?
um, yeah, I mean, politically, I'm very left leaning now, and I continue to occasionally read like books on religion, particularly like out of the liberation theology tradition, or just like reading books on religion and kind of thinking how that leads to a kind of progressive orientation in certain respects. And I think there is something resonant about that kind of more theological, scriptural, poetic language that resonates with me. Um, and I don't know if that's like my personality or because of the way I was raised, or probably bits of both. But I still find religion like uplifting to engage with. And I also still think it's important to engage with it because, for better or worse, it is like a part of our society and our culture, and understanding like both how it can be a way of spiraling downwards, but also that it has certain amounts of emancipatory potential. So, kind of understanding how it intersects with things like identity and politics and things like that, I think is important. And understanding how you're kind of shaped by some of those forces, for better and worse, is also important.
Oh
And kind
yeah.
of finding potential in those dynamics for something better and healthier.
Wow.
Um, so I definitely still there's something still very religious about my life, um, even if not in a way that anyone else or that most people would, you know, assign as religion.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, because you
yeah,
still want to lean towards, like you said, like that rhetoric and kind of framework,
yeah. I mean,
regardless of the content. If that makes sense.
right, and the idea. Well, I mean, content is important, I think,
Oh
but
yeah, no, yeah, but like I'm saying, you can have the rhetoric and form and framework, but not it
right,
not be Christianity.
right. I mean, yeah, I still think like just that kind of basic Christian claim of not being of this world, is kind
Hmm.
of a worthwhile starting point for thinking critically about our times and our society. Kind of thinking about what it is, um, or what's wrong with this world and what it would mean to kind of live beyond it, trying to see the present from the point of view of the future, that sort of
Wow.
thing. I think can kind of help orient ourselves a bit in a more productive way.
Yeah, that might be like the healthiest takeaway I've heard so far. Um,
Yeah.
but I guess it's like due to the fact that you were so intentional about it and it kind of being a longer process. Because just
Yeah, I
knowing you,
mean,
you can't half-ass the intellectual side of it, which is
yeah, that's
incredible.
definitely part of it. I think also just studying philosophy as much as I have, particularly in the traditions that I've kind of focused on. I've just learned to kind of articulate this maybe a little better. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, I definitely can't like half-ass things like that because they're important to kind of
Yeah.
understand really well.
And that's
Um,
why when you get ambiguous answers to stuff, you're like, No, like don't wave your hand at this problem. This is a critical issue."
what's funny is I definitely can wave my hands at some problems.
Hmm.
Uh, it's just some things kind of hook me
Yeah.
in a certain way, um, and I kind of have to take it. But I mean, there are lots of things that I just do not give a shit about. Um, so
Do you a lo- when you finally were like, okay, yeah, hell yeah, I'm an atheist. That's what's up. Did you still give a shit about the kind of ambiguous anxiety, or did that shit, at least as far as eternal life, kind of just disappear? You were finally done with it, or is that still
it's
a a thing.
It's still a part of me.
Yeah.
I'm more aware of it now, but like I still feel like a weird sort of guilt over, even like having a crush on somebody or like
Hmm.
finding them sexually attractive. I still find like hard to, just accept at times, but I'm
Yeah.
certainly
No,
like
that's big.
better at it than I once
Hmm.
was. Um, yeah, I don't know if it'll ever go away, but
But
it's
I
certainly
guess over time you can
it's
kind of see it more clearly for what it is.
yeah, and you can kind of push through it. But I'm still, I don't know, maybe I just have like a guilty personality or something. Um, just lacking the like natural confidence or charisma to kind of push through it.
Psh. I don't know. I don't know if it's confidence or charisma. I don't know what it is though, because that means I do as well. Um, no, I feel you. That's definitely yeah. Yeah, saying feeling guilty for having a crush on someone is like that was like that's real. Like
Yeah,
I would just avoid. I would just tell myself like not even to think. Like don't even deal with it because like just that's being rude to them was my that like
yeah,
actually my what I internalized. Like I'm being a dick for
right,
like being attracted to this person. And there's that
right,
you can be a dick about how you act on that for sure.
right.
Um,
See,
but for me, it
my
was just the from the get go. No.
exactly, and for me, like sometimes I worry that it pushes me in the opposite direction of like I try and avoid them in a way where like I'm not being rude, but then that kind of becomes its own way of being rude.
Yeah, because if they're like
Um,
a friend or someone that wants to like interact with you and hang out with
maybe they
you,
just
then
want to kick it,
yeah, maybe they
or
want to
maybe
make out
they
with you just as badly as you want to make out with them.
right. Like, I mean, probably not, but you never know.
You
But
do never
the
know.
point is, like, you kind of like overcompensate in weird ways.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Um, I guess as far as like the the ambiguous anxiety, I'm gonna use that forever now because that's yeah, that's too good, too real. Um, did you did you have like a decent amount of purpose? I guess from religion. I guess it seems like you didn't draw too heavily off of it. Like you've been saying, it's more social than.
Um, I think I wanted to, but this comes back to kind of the way where, like, for me, Christianity seemed like this radical um, demand almost, or kind of it seems to demand something really intensely different than the sort of world we occupy, and that we do something about it. And my church was never really about that. It wasn't lacking in like the occasional mission trip here and there, but it didn't connect that to any sort of broader struggle
Hmm.
that it and you see lots of churches that do, but in very like reactionary ways. So I didn't want to sign on to their politics, but I did feel like, you know, maybe we should kind of learn something at least about their intensity and their fervor. And my church was kind of very banal in that sense. And I think that weird like disjoint between Christianity seems to want to offer like that intense purpose about life, while at the same time my church wasn't really doing anything, beyond like, a mission trip every summer or something that just didn't seem to add up.
Mm.
um, so I think yes and no. It put the desire for a broader purpose in me, but
Ooh,
didn't actually provide one. um, so I think that disjoint eventually became very important for me.
yeah, that's a yeah. It's seeing yeah. I guess the like you said, disjoint between what you're professing believing and the actual action.
Yeah,
A lot of people, yeah, I get that as kind of a thing. Like, okay, what are we doing then?
right. And I think just thinking about um, like my upbringing, where it was kind of church was a thing we did on Sunday, and we honestly lived lives that were largely indistinguishable from non-believers. There just wasn't anything that seemed to really set us apart in terms of the food we ate, the house we lived in, the school we went to, and the things we did with ourselves.
Yeah.
It just was kind of, we were just a generic upper middle class American family, and
Yeah.
we happened to go to church Sunday mornings, and that was kind of it. Um,
Very much so
yeah,
in the world, not well of the world, I should say.
yeah, of the world.
Yeah. It is interesting because the Bible does, and if anyone ever listens to this, they can probably correct me with the actual verse. But there's more, like it says, "Be into the world, but not of the world." And even in other places, stresses that people should just know. They should look at you and be like, "What the fuck is wrong with this person?" Like the
Yeah.
way you live your life should be, yeah, like radical and like stand out. And
Well, and
I,
that's what a lot of the rhetoric is
yeah,
about. Like I remember going to like places like Chick, and they would kind of talk about how we're gonna like change the world and start a revolution, and it just wasn't that. Like there was nothing actually happening. Um, or you listen to, I don't know, just the generic Christian music about like um I don't know, God kind of coming and redeeming the world. And at the most, it was just kind of like waiting for him to come
hmm
redeem it. We weren't really called to do anything, and that just struck me as weird. Um, so yeah, it was just this very. At the end of the day, it was a very intensely banal upbringing, um,
yeah,
but with this really radical rhetoric. And yeah, that disjoint is ultimately kind of what
yep,
drives a lot of how I kind of understand myself now, kind of trying to, either live up to the demand or accept the banality. And for me, I prefer to kind of try and orient myself in the former way, kind of taking seriously
hmm
what
it's
demands for justice entail.
it's funny that you do that after. I mean, like, not that you weren't doing this before, but you like become an atheist and still internalize those concepts and better than a lot of. I'm not saying there are Christians and there are churches that definitely do a really great job
Yeah.
of actually, I guess taking the Bible seriously and living radically. But you kind of do that without it, if that makes sense. Which is, it's funny. A lot of people would leave and just be like, "Fuck it, I don't even. I don't. Well, I guess it's like not people don't get their morality from religion, so like you leave and that doesn't change how you live your life. But it's
Yeah, they
cool
become
that you
kind of
exemplify those traits.
nihilistic about it. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know. I never really I don't think I could be kind of like a nihilist in that sense. Because I've always been very angry about a lot of things.
yeah,
Like just seeing how certain people are treated and have to, live off social and economic scraps, and that's just infuriating to me. Um, and it kind of always has been. And so now I kind of choose to lean into that anger a little
yeah.
more.
Do you think you would have had that reaction with or without religion? Like I'm gonna answer my own question for you. I think you would have, just knowing you. But that
I don't
is a
know,
difficult thing
to
to
be
know.
honest. I really don't
Yeah, that's
know. Um, I don't know. For me, it's a very visceral anger a lot of the
yeah.
time. So I like to think that I would have, but
hmm
yeah, it's hard to really say. I think I still would have, but it would have come out in very different ways. I think the religiosity kind of is in some ways it's the framework or rhetoric, but ultimately I think the content would still be there. Or at least I hope so. I don't know.
hmm
Ultimately,
I think so. Just knowing you and knowing people like you, I feel like the level of empathy needed to muster up that kind of anger reaction to seeing injustice is, it seems almost intrinsic. Um Not that you
Maybe.
can't learn empathy, but I don't know, the people that are really straight up smacked by it, like I feel like you are, tend to. I feel like from all walks of life, that's a thing that I've noticed from people from all different upbringings.
Hmm.
Um, but the way people go about it, like you said, is different depending on that how you're brought up. It can shape it.
Right.
Well, I don't want to blow my final question too early, so I'm gonna make this not my final question because I'm gonna do some add-on ones. But because we're right here, we're kind of like talking about purpose and meaning. Yeah, after leaving the church, like what is the thing you left towards? Like, how do you find meaning outside of religion? I guess I should say, because I feel like you
um,
definitely, like you said, you couldn't do the whole nihilism thing, which is like who can? Um, but
yeah, I don't know. For me personally, um, I think for me, I've had points in my life where I enjoyed being alive, um, and I was, at least like moderately happy or satisfied, or doing something engaging enough that even if I was struggling, like life still felt worth living. Um,
mhm,
because I had something that had my attention. And for me, those moments are or those times are worth fighting for and making sure everyone has access to that sort of life where even if you're not like totally satisfied, you're at least able to kind of engage in something meaningful. I mean, for me, like it was a lot of college because even though I was wrestling with big questions and was depressed at a lot of times, I was still like spending a lot of time in the library, just kind of reading things that were interesting and talking with professors about stuff I found interesting. And I'd like more people to be able to engage that, or, if they want to make art or, just ride their bike or start a garden. Like, I just think kind of trying to build a world where people are able to pursue those things that bring them a certain sort of
mm,
satisfaction or joy, um, is worth fighting for.
yeah, wow.
So,
It feels like you got to like a certain point, like a pretty healthy point on like the hierarchy of needs. And instead of like, okay, how do I get to the next rung? You're like, how do I get everyone else to where I am? And that's
yeah,
we need more people with that outlook. I need to be more like that, honestly.
yeah, yeah. I guess, and because the lowest points I've been at, like the most depressed and suicidal I've been at, has often been connected to like issues of like financial precarity or, um, thinking about certain like political contexts and situations. So kind of realizing like how connected, the personal and political are and can be. And I mean, even like my happiest times were like times where I just had a lot of time to read or write or ride my bike, and realizing that I had those sorts of long stretches where I could do that because I came from a very well off family. Um, so I could,
Hmm.
go to college without worrying about the cost, and study whatever I wanted and stuff like that, and wanting everyone else to kind of have that sort of freedom to cultivate a life they find worth living.
Oh, hell yeah, that is that's solid. I don't even have like any taglines to that answer. Just like
Yeah.
period.
Yeah,
Enter
it's just kind
next.
of intuitive to me that everyone deserves that.
Hell
Um,
yeah, that's
I,
if that was
I
more
don't
of a
have I
trend,
don't have a
we'd be
good
so good.
argument for it. It's just kind of how I feel about it.
I don't
Um,
think you because anyone that has an argument against that is immediately. I feel like the burden of proof is on them.
yeah, I
um,
mean, common sense can work in weird ways.
yeah.
So
Oof. Yeah, that's a hell of a rabbit trail. Is there? I don't know. You mentioned some hard times. Is there anything that you would want if you could tell yourself? This is I hate this question, but I love it. If you could go back in time and talk to yourself at like I don't know, pick like a tough part in like your religious musings and mullings over. Like, is there anything you would feel like you could tell younger you that would be like of relief or helpful?
Oh boy.
I
I
can
don't
role play like
know.
17-year-old you if you want.
um, I don't know, because I think like I'd be scared to like throw anything off on the timeline
Okay, well, imagine that like
regarding
the
where I go. I don't know. I could maybe like kind of accelerate the process a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, I'm working on a book right now, and it feels like it's being written in some ways to the me of several years ago.
Ooh.
Um, kind of, even though it's very like abstract and theoretical, it's kind of answering a lot of the questions I had. Um, so I don't know. I'd sooner just give him that book because I don't really like. I don't think I'd want to talk to myself. That doesn't sound like a good conversation because I'm very stubborn. Um,
Yeah,
so I think that would just go nowhere. But if I could give him the book, maybe that would be good enough.
yeah. What's the book called? You should plug it for all the
I, I'm
thousands
I'm
of
at
people
the
that are gonna
point
listen.
where I'm looking for a publisher.
Hell yeah.
So if you're listening to this and you're an editor, maybe you can get to me in time. But
Yeah, strike while the iron's hot. If you don't, you miss out. Sorry.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, still polishing the rough edges and everything. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, oh, maybe like we can talk about that some other time. But
yeah. Word. It's interesting. So just give your younger self that book. That I feel like that messes with the timeline more than just
I
talking. Like you can wear like a hood. Like it doesn't have to know that it's future you. You can be like some wise
yeah, I would
old
need to
man.
change the name on the title of the book because I don't think like 17-year-old me would believe like there's no fucking way because 17-year-old me didn't read a lot to be honest.
Oh yeah.
Um, and the bibliography to this book is pretty long. So it's like, okay, something clearly changed very dramatically.
Okay, if you
Um,
could do a too long didn't read of that of what you were trying to say, what would you
um,
say to the dumbass version of you at 17 who just borderline illiterate, just did not read,
uh,
smoking cigarettes, not going to school?
I don't know. You have a weird vision of me at 17. I think, I don't know. I think partly trying to kind of just meet me where I was would be very difficult because I was just locked in this kind of mode of fear and anxiety.
Hmm.
Um, and kind of this need to like prove something. I'm not sure what, like that I'm a man, that I'm, self sufficient, that I'm, strong or capable or whatever. Um, so I think it would just be a lot of work trying to
Yeah.
get through that. Like there were so many walls that were built up, and that I still have definitely. But like, I do things like go to therapy now, so I'm trying to like get through them brick by brick.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't even know what I could say to kind of unwind that because I was so locked up.
Hmm. Yeah, that is a good question. Like, how do you get through to someone like that? I don't know. My default reaction is just like hug. I'd want to hug 17-year-old you and 17-year-old me.
I don't know how I would have responded to a hug. I don't know if it would have been. I don't think it would have gone as well as you seem to think it would have.
Nah, dude, I gave such good hugs. I still do. No, we would have been hug buddies. Or you could have just been like a whisper on the wind, like go to therapy.
I don't think I would have heard.
No,
Like I would have just been like, no, that's for the weak. I guess that's for girls. Like,
oh boy. I mean,
yeah.
I always wanted to go to
the
therapy.
the irony now is like I'm talking to you. I have my nails painted with polka dots. I'm wearing like a dress and stuff. Like I've clearly had a strong reversal of ideas about what it means to be me.
Hmm.
Um, So, but
Oh yeah.
that was such a long process, and it required so many different layers of rewiring. Um, I don't know what I would have to say
Can
to
you?
kickstart that process earlier is the thing.
Yeah.
Um,
What was? I'm trying to think of how I can ask this without being too general. But what was that process kind of like for you, especially coming from a church where like masculinity and I guess gender, how you do gender is very. There's like pretty unspoken but very specific rules on what you're supposed to be. Like, what was it like unwriting those?
um, oh man. Um, well, I think I studied gender studies in college. That was one of my minors. And so even like all through college, I still had like a beard and wore just, corduroy pants and a t-shirt. Like I was not expressing any ambiguity about my gender then. But I had accepted in kind of an intellectual sense the ambiguity of gender, um, and kind of detached myself from any sort of strict orthodox biblical reading of gender roles.
Hmm.
So I had it kind of on, I had my views on that loosened, at least like just kind of in my head at a conceptual level.
Yeah.
And then it was like sometime after graduation, um, like I had a friend actually just out of the blue. He was like, I think I want to wear a dress. And I was like a little surprised, but I was just like, okay, cool. And then I thought about it and I was like, I kind of want to try painting my nails now.
Hell yeah.
And that is how the gay agenda works.
Got
So
him.
I don't know. Eventually, like I was just trying on leggings and tank tops and stuff. And actually, the first like girly thing I bought was with you.
Hell yeah.
We were at like Goodwill or something. Um, so yeah, yeah, and the kid who first like said that to me just like texted me like a few weeks ago saying that they were starting like hormone replacement therapy. So like yeah,
Nice.
change does happen bit by bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a
Um,
process because you want to. I guess every step of the way you want to make sure that it is you.
yeah,
And when
and
you
for
have such
me,
a
I'm such like I have to have it in my head in a conceptual sense before I can do it at the level of like practice or
yeah.
identity. Um, so I needed like several years of like uh, minoring in gender studies. I'm like Fox News's worst nightmare about like liberal college campuses
Yeah.
run amok.
Poster boy for the gay agenda.
Exactly. But like it's like the college I was at was like religious, and it was the headquarters of the evangelical church. So it's like, yeah, even there. Um, yeah.
Nice. Would you consider going back to church?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't. I don't hate the people there or anything, and I don't hate that was my childhood. But there still is like, I don't think I would say it's a traumatic place for me, but it is a
Mm,
place with some. There's still I still just have a lot of emotions that are kind of tied in weird knots, and so I just don't. I've gone back a couple times, like for Christmas, the Christmas service or whatever. And my mom's always like, "Oh, I just love that you're here with us," and I just want to fucking kill myself the whole
yeah.
time. So I just don't go.
Yeah.
Um, it's just not a good place for me anymore, and it's not because anyone did anything wrong, in my opinion. It's just it wasn't the place for me, and I just had to go there for so long and play along for so long
Hmm.
that it's not like it's not like a resentment for like any reactionary views. It's just I had to play along for so long.
That's exhausting.
Yeah,
And when you're
and
done doing that, you're like, I don't like you. When you're, I guess, stronger and more set in your identity, it seems, yeah, being that disingenuous seems, it's uncomfortable. You don't want to be back in that.
Right. Um, yeah, and not everyone knows like what sort of transitions you've gone through.
Hmm.
So and I don't want to go there and just be provocative, you know, I don't want to just show
Yeah.
up, you know, in full drag queen mode and you know, say there's no God,
Yeah.
you know, but you also don't want people making the wrong assumptions. So for me it's just I think better to just stay away and let them do them and me do me.
That makes
Um,
sense.
yeah. Yeah, I am glad that I got to a point where I'm not like resentful of my upbringing. At least, like
Mm.
I'm glad for that.
Oh yeah, that's a
Um,
super important thing to get through. You,
yeah, and accepting it for what it is, and it helps that it wasn't like a terrible upbringing. It just had some weird tensions that I eventually couldn't live with and had to kind of move on from.
yeah,
So,
you seem to have done it extremely gracefully. um,
it was
what?
not graceful the whole way through. I can assure you.
Yeah, well, definitely internally, but or
Yeah, I
even
mean,
externally to a point. Like I don't know your entire
well,
life.
I mean, you only met me my senior year of college.
Yeah.
So by then I kind of like was a bit more set in myself.
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm pretty good at putting on a good presentation, I guess, so that helps, but still like yeah, there were times definitely that were not as graceful.
Yeah, yeah. When I met you, my first thought was like, oh, this person's like, because I was going when I met you, I was not set on anything. I didn't know what I believed. I didn't know what anything was. When I saw you, I was like, I was impressed. I was like, holy shit, this dude knows this. This is this. You were like deliberate about who you are and like what you believe. Like there's a whole lot of,
Yeah.
I guess, like ambiguity in life at the time. It was good meeting you and talking to you and becoming your friend. Kind of inspired me to be more deliberate about. I mean, just like listening to you talk about how your process was for conceptually and intellectually going through, I guess, Christianity, post Christianity, and like gender stuff is so. That's inspiring because my gut reaction is kind of like to like fade away from that stuff. So I don't know. I
Yeah,
wouldn't I wouldn't undersell yourself on
I like that I give off those vibes.
that.
But sometimes a vibe is just a vibe.
Yeah. Wow.
Definitely. I do get like I get contacted on like Twitter by people asking questions about philosophy, and they're often very surprised that I'm not like a grad student or a professor somewhere. Like I no, I just read a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's good because you're smart.
I also just don't have friends, so I just read all day. Um, I mean, I have like three friends, but you know,
That's good. Jesus didn't have
not
many
a
friends either. That's what I was told.
12.
As yeah, yeah. That's well, okay. Yeah, there's 12. But then I think there was like what? There's someone I did actually. I was presented with the hierarchy of Jesus' friends. It was supposed to be for the model of art, how you were supposed to have friendships. He had a group of 12, but then he had like two or three that he was even closer with.
And then one
Um,
who stabbed him in the back, that sort of
yeah.
thing.
Well,
Yeah.
you got, yeah. Everyone's got to have their Judas.
Right. And everyone's got to have their, you know, Mary Magdalene or whatever,
Oh yeah.
like your side piece. Or
Ah! uh,
it's important, dude.
yeah. Yeah, I got to cover all the bases.
Yeah.
Mm. You kind of mentioned, I guess we talked about gender roles a little bit. Was there much concrete discussion on how relationships, like romantic relationships, were supposed to be? And I
Yeah.
guess,
We definitely. So most of our talk about sex was mostly about how you're supposed to kind of save yourself.
yeah, of course,
Um, and we got a very unhealthy view of even that because it was very much like boys like to push the line, so girls kind of have to girls don't push as much. Not always, but usually that was kind of the basic message we got. Um, although they would then pull the guys aside and be like, "Yep, we know they look hot, but you can't do that." And that
Oh
was about
god.
it. That was as far as our like sex
Yeah.
ed went,
But the
really.
pastor can get up there and be like, "There's my hot wife in the crowd. Look at that."
I do get to have sex with her because we're
Yeah.
married,
It's
like
like,
Christ approved.
yep.
Yep, it's really
He's there.
cool.
He's watching,
In the room.
and that makes it even
Um,
hotter.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, and we also got like a lot of the talks about the different ways boys and girls are. Like we got the girls are like spaghetti, boys are like waffles.
Yep.
Like girls are like always thinking about a million things at once, and boys are much more organized and compartmentalized. Um, Stuff like that. Um, yeah, and that would usually then lead into like guys have one track minds, and when it comes to like girls, they just kind of they're very easily turned on, whereas like girls
Hmm.
just aren't, which is part of why they have to be gatekeepers. They're like more in control. So yeah, I still wrestle with that a lot more at the level of like it still blows my mind that women are horny and like sex. Like it still just does not compute on like a
Mhm.
basic fundamental
Yeah,
level.
because you're
Um,
told from a very young age that that's just not the case. Like
right.
explicitly.
Well, in one of my favorite movies when I was growing up was Superbad. And like the
Oh
whole
shit.
logic of that plot is like the girls would never have sex with us sober, so we need to get them drunk. Like that's kind of this a lot of the subtext of a lot of
Hmm.
those movies is this idea that like women need to be pushed and coerced and tricked almost. Um, and so yeah, it's still just
And that
it's and I think that's part of where my guilt comes from. Like
I
we
was
were
gonna say
saying
that feeds
earlier, like
right into that.
right, like you just think like why would this girl ever like me because she's a girl and girls by definition
Yeah. And if
don't
you do,
like
oh yeah.
anyone, like they're just not into that stuff, like right.
Mm. And then you feel
So
like if you do somehow trick them into being interested in you, that's you feel guilty because you've been evil about it. I yeah.
right, yeah,
Uh
yeah, and I'm selling a very simple picture. I'm better at this now, or better at understanding this, but it still
mhm.
is like on a basic intuitive level, still something I have to like wrestle with and
Oh yeah.
think very deliberately about. So
Yeah. Yeah, there I feel like it's post Christianity is a minefield of those things that you can conceptually and rationally realize is
are
like a
wrong,
yeah, but you still
but
have your brain still
yeah, you
makes
get
you
you
feel
get
weird.
these emotional and ideological knots that are just really hard to untie,
Yeah.
even if you recognize it for being the knot that it
Yeah.
is.
And that's like the most
So
frustrating place to be in. Cuz like yeah, it's you know you're working and progressing and that feels good, but you're also like I don't know,
exactly.
I always feel like once I see it, I should immediately be able to rise above it.
Right.
And since Adam and Eve ate the apple, we live in a fallen world and that's not how it works.
Yeah.
That's something I've retained all my life. My dad would always say when somebody he would like drop a knife while he was like washing dishes and be like, oh, "It's a fallen world." Like just like for small things.
What?
Yeah, like he would for like
Oh
small
my
inconveniences, he'd be like, "I'm
god.
sick of this earth." So I'll still say that.
Oh my god.
uh,
Oh wow.
well,
That's wild.
yeah. But it's interesting. I don't know. As someone that's like kind of in a similar place as far as like trying to rewrite how I view relationships, and I kind of like rubber banded at least from the gender roles as far as like the man has to be in charge and stuff. I've like
Yeah.
um kind of
And your first
presumed,
like partner used they them pronouns and that sort
yeah,
of thing, and you were just like on board.
yeah, because that meant
Um,
that I didn't have to be the dude in the relationship because
right.
they weren't we were just two people,
Right.
and that's always like and the fact that that's not evil or bad, and I'm not lesser for wanting a more like equal footing, and
Egalitarian.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I that's not to knock. Some people are I've seen couples thrive in kind of the biblical schematic for a relationship. Um, it- at least they take away only the good parts. I think like both parties are essentially trying to outserve the other one.
Mhm.
Which I guess is like you can do, and like you said, an egalitarian, a more equal relationship. But
Mhm.
I don't know. It's interesting. Like I definitely like I just have like this intense reaction to that. To but I'm
Yeah.
not trying to knock it. It's always I try to end everything with like, this is like I hate this, not for me. But there's it's fine. I still like church people.
Hmm. They're doing their best.
Yeah. Um. So I already asked about meaning and relationships. Like fucked up my order of things. How do you? I guess how do you feel now about? I'm gonna stay on relationships. Like, where are you at in that journey? Because I'm interested because I'm in a similar boat. You know what? You can dive as deep as you want or like as shallowly into this now. But like,
Like, am
would
I
you,
dating someone?
no,
No.
no. Actually, like, I go. I guess like, what am I
We're
even
like
trying to say?
straying way off of religion. If that, like,
Yeah.
I mean, we can talk about like Christian mingle or something, I guess, off the bat.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we don't have to go into that. Just cut this shit. Cut this fucking shit. Um.
we're keeping it in.
No. I'll just like say more and more awful, horrible things.
We're just gonna spiral downwards. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not like the worst thing to do.
Yeah.
Um.
On the bright side, no one will listen to this, so.
Yeah. And if they got this far in, they deserve what they get. It's like you held on this long.
we're just
You were waiting.
we're just abusing our listeners at
Yeah,
this point.
that's the goal. Oh, they'll like it, dude. We're gonna get people love this shit because they've been waiting. That okay, there's a payoff, there's a build up, and then
And
just
it's just
like
us telling them they're idiots for like
yeah,
bothering to stick with it.
middle fingers right now. You can't see me because this is a audio medium. This is not visual, so I have to use my words. Fuck you for listening to this. You're probably going to hell for
We
listening to
might,
this.
yeah. Now we're getting to a point where I'm gonna have to cut some of this out.
No. Yeah.
And
Um.
anyway, you were working towards a question to bring it
Oh god.
back.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was. Not successfully. Um. All right. What would you say to someone else that's like currently in a transition phase? That like all they say to you is like, "Hey, I'm like kind of starting like to doubt stuff. I feel weird about it. You seem to have your shit together." Because honestly, I seriously wanted to ask you that when I first met you. I was like, I feel like I'm going your direction. I wasn't far enough in like in my head. I kind of like I guess you were kind of talking about at Chick. You wanted to have some experience. I was still on that boat, so I wasn't ready to ask you this.
Right.
But yeah, okay. Go back in time. I ask you. You seem to have your stuff together. I'm kind of like in that zone.
it
Help.
it really depends because I think everyone needs something different
Oh yeah.
in that sort of situation. I mean, my inclination is to recommend books, which doesn't work for everyone, but it at least kind of
Hmm.
maybe gives me kind of a starting point or a way of trying to understand them. So it does kind of depend on what sort of person they are and what exactly they're wrestling with. Like someone who comes to me and says, like, I think I'm gay. How do I make sense of this? Is very different than just having doubts about theology
Mm.
in some cases. So I don't know. I guess I don't have. Yeah, sorry to disappoint. I don't have like a specific answer. Um, yeah, it goes back to kind of. Um, I think it goes back to the thing I was saying earlier. Like, what would I say to 17-year-old me? Because I think a lot
Yeah.
of these doubts are very intertwined with people's identities, and so you kind of
Hmm.
have to kind of see how they're wired and why certain questions are coming up, and you kind of need to work with that.
I mean, that
Um,
can be the advice to the person is like when you have these questions, why ask yourself why you're asking them. And like I
exactly,
guess
and
imply like a deeper level of introspection.
right. Yeah. So for me, it's kind of I think of it almost in like therapeutic terms. Kind of, you need to accept the patient as they come to you and kind of figure out what exactly it is you're working with and go from there.
Hmm.
Not everyone can start at the same
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
place, and not everyone is going to go in the same direction. I don't mind if someone ends up Christian after that phase or process.
Yeah.
I just want them to have something deeper and richer for it.
Oh yeah.
So I
Yeah.
kind of want to try and do my best to just help them become the best version of themselves. Um,
Yeah,
so
that's the goal. If I were to try to repackage that into advice for an idiot 17-year-old version of you, it's like, yeah, take the patient as they are. You try to do that for yourself, which is really hard. But
yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know how I would do it with myself.
I just like
You know,
accepting and seeing where you are and being like trying to understand it. And
I think I would try and just kind of move the process along, like give myself more comfortable with articulating doubts and skepticism,
yeah.
and kind of push myself to maybe start like I started really reading once I got towards college, and kind of like I discovered philosophy as a thing like my senior year of high school via like Reddit, which is always a great place to learn about that sort of stuff, obviously. Fortunately, I went beyond the Reddit
Yeah.
level, but I guess I would have like given myself more books
Hmm.
earlier and kind of just like try to have conversations about them, because that kind of creates like a safe space to kind of test out ideas
Yeah.
where you don't necessarily need to go forward with them right away. You can kind of play with them emotionally and intellectually. Um, so I think really I didn't need like a specific idea. I just needed a space to kind of wrestle openly, um, and I didn't really have that. Um,
Mm.
and I didn't really have people who this is where my like smugness comes out. I didn't have people who I really looked up to intellectually, who I thought like, yes, I really respect what they have to say, so I want to talk to them about this. I just didn't have a lot of people like that in my life until I went to college and had professors who obviously like someone like me is going to just kind of look up to anyone with a PhD pretty much. Um, so that kind of was what kind of helped me open up about that stuff a little more.
Right.
And I think if I could have just had a couple more people like that when I was in high school, it would have been a much more productive 4 years for me emotionally, or at the point of my identity, um, to kind of open me up a little earlier.
That makes sense. Yeah. It's yeah. So instead of saying something, you just have to create this atmosphere, and yeah, it's better. Yeah, I was asking for. I don't know what I was asking for. Some kind of like 3 sentence thing that'll like cure 17-year-old you. But
There's no
you're yeah,
cure.
exactly. Not cure, but like that makes what you said. Yeah, it's perfect. You got to create the atmosphere and like safety to explore different
I
ideas.
mean, it's a process, so the best thing you can do is try and facilitate the process of transformation. You can't like pause it, and you can't skip over it. You have to go through it. So it's more about like helping them make the most of that time period.
Sorry.
I can
Can you
hear
hear
them in the
that?
back.
Okay. Okay.
I'm leaving a footnote in case we want to cut that out. What is going on?
I feel good. You have to definitely have to cut this. My I think my drunk roommate is fucking with me. Yep, that's what that is. Guaranteed. He has a good didgeridoo impression.
Hmm.
I gotta soundproof my room. Definitely, yeah, definitely footnote cut this. You can't cut the other stuff though. That was deep. That was real. That was raw to the few listeners. Was
Right.
real. Um.
Yeah.
Okay, smudge the ending again. I blew my how do you make a meeting question way too early. Is there any weird? Fuck. Okay, we can do a 3, 2, 1, and then I need to ask like a final question. Or like we
Just
did.
go ahead.
But okay, no, yeah. Just leave it up to the editing master. At least now I have time to think about it though. God damn it. Is it too weird to just do like a sum up like okay, cool. That's like Steven writing a book. Go read it. I mean I have to wait until you actually publish it to feel like
Yeah, you
like
can't
plug
really
it.
plug anything.
Yeah. That's
Right
all I want to
now.
do. I just want to plug stuff.
Yeah, the problem is I've like the only other like thing I've published is a personal essay,
Yeah.
and it's print only in a magazine that has since been
Hmm.
shut down. My first ever print publication was like the last issue of a small literary journal, so that was like how I kicked off. If I ever get a writing career, that's how I kicked off. So
Yeah. Hell yeah.
who knows? Maybe that'll be like metaphorical or something. But yeah.
Right. God damn, because that was such a I'm sorry I broke. I was keeping such a like. I was doing so good at not laughing after hearing that sound.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, oh, he totally hears this too. And it sounds like I'm cracking up to you, like saying really meaningful stuff.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for you to restart.
Yeah, me too. I don't know how to like give a good sense of an ending.
Well, we were talking about process and transformation and the importance of facilitating that in a healthy way. So
Hmm.
I don't know if that jars your thought
Yeah,
process there.
I was like, I definitely want to ask, like, how do we create a space like that,
Mm.
for other people? And like, yeah,
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Because like all the places for me that it's been either like college or a place like some study fellowship, and it's kind of hard to get everyone there. Um, so I don't know. Building community is difficult but important. Um,
oh yeah,
so I don't know. I'm not an organizer in that way, so I have no idea.
yeah.
Um,
Oh gosh, I'll find
I would
one
just
and then
I would
I'll.
just tell people to not be afraid to like take time off and go find somewhere that really works for them and allows them to open up and explore, um, to kind of look for those sorts of opportunities, and reach out to people and see if they know something. Like just say, hey, I'm looking for something. You don't have to know what. Maybe they'll know.
Yeah,
Um,
and pretty much everyone can relate to that, and they're
right.
willing to meet you there.
Hmm. Yeah.
I've encountered very few people that are just dicks about that. Like, oh, psh, like, look at this guy. He doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Like, no, people, yeah, reaching out. Well, I think that is some good advice. God damn it.
We're gonna need to learn how to close these off.
Fucking right.
Bye.